Hey everybody, it's Michelle, and I am coming to you today with another chat from our daily podcast. So today's podcast, we talked about killing your inner Goliath. Now, if you're not familiar with what a Goliath is a giant, and it's taken from a parable metaphor, story, however you want to look at it from the Bible, where the Bible hero, King David, well, at this time, he wasn't King David, he was just David. David stepped up to the plate, and there was this giant that everybody in his camp was scared of. And David stepped up to the plate and was like, so what? He's a kid. He didn't even have a sword. And all he has is a slingshot. And it goes like this. He faces him. The giant is like, what you gonna do to me? And David is like, okay. He shoots the slingshot, and the blow lands right between the giant's eyes, and then he is dead. He goes down with that one hit from a slingshot. Now there are many layers to everything. There are many codes, and when especially if you're thinking of things like metaphor, symbol, all of that is a wink wink, or a parable story. All of that is a wink wink to tell you that the surface is just the beginning. And so, yeah, we can look at killing Goliath as killing a giant of a external oppression. But today, I want to look at the inner ones. And it's funny to me, in not a funny way, but in a peculiar way, that Goliath went down once David propelled a rock or a projectile from his slingshot into the the area where we call it the third eye, where the pineal gland lives, where it is our link to getting us into a higher awareness, connecting with the cosmic all, and helping us to supersede ourselves. And I these chats, if you're listening to the podcast, I try to give you a little bit more, or dig a little deeper on something that I didn't cover in the podcast. And so I definitely want you to comment, let me know you're out there. You can, because this is a chat, it's not just me. But anyway, I wanted to say that when he hit the Goliath between the eyes, and the Goliath went down, it made him preternatural. Yeah, that was what started his journey to becoming a great warrior king for Israel in the Bible. And I was like, hmm. And the reason why I said that is because, of course, a lot of this stuff I'm talking to you guys because we're out here together. I'm out here trying to learn it just like y'all. I don't pretend to be anybody's guru. I do come with some sage wisdom because I've been there and I'm telling you what I know, not what I heard. But when you actually take the time to transpose that story onto our own lives, I want to ask you, when's the last time you slung a slingshot at your giants? When's the last time you took down something that was causing you to be defeated, scaring you away, causing you to give up, run, whatever it might be? And I had to look at that because there are some things that I was guilty of. I was, like shrinking in the back, like, okay, I just got to, this is just a way of life. This is what I just got to deal with. And in taking this wisdom that exploded within me, I started seeing some things. And there's this thing that not thing, a quote that I read that I think is attributed to one of my favorite nonfiction authors, Robert Greene. I have a lot of nonfiction authors I love as well as fiction authors. And let me just go on and tell you, there is a book that I talk about in the podcast, and it's called The Law of Human Nature by Robert Greene. He's the same guy who did the 48 Laws of Power, The Art of Seduction, 33 Strategies of War, Mastery. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you, the way he writes, well, first of all, it takes him about 6 years to put out a book. So he's put out 6 books. And if you look at that, and one of them was the 50th law. So That one was a collab. But if you look at that and just take 5 of those books, that's 30 years. And he actually wrote this book after he had a major stroke. He was a very healthy guy, but yet and still he had a stroke where, he's using a cane and there are different things that he's having to learn to redo. And in the midst of it, he still wrote this book. And I think this is, I say, his best one to date. Because in the other ones, like if you look at 48 Laws of Power, boy, it'll have you thinking you know how to do some stuff. If you look at 33 Strategies of War, your come up game is going to be strong. He is going to teach you some strategy, some mind trickery, and everything else, and then on and on. But this one is more inclusive because what it does is he uses in it. There are 18 laws that he looks at, and those laws, he tells you how to recognize a deficiency or a Goliath in someone else, but then that wisdom sets in and he starts to tell you how to recognize it in yourself and start to deal with it. And that's what I really love about this. So anyway, with this finding a way to deal with your Goliaths, the first thing I'm going to say is this, and that is when I was reading it and going through it, the book, he said something that was profound. And what he said is that your strength and weakness is the same. Yeah, your strength and weakness is the same. Now, I don't want to rehash what I talked about in the podcast, but I'll just suffice it to say that when I looked at the word, your strengths and weaknesses, I was so busy trying to reconcile what that meant that another wisdom smack almost got away from me. And that was the word same. And if you look at same, oh my goodness, the etymology of that word means one, together, homo as in same, and it makes it where when you start looking at it, just really getting down to it, how can your strength and your weakness be the same thing? And that's when I started realizing that for me, going back and looking at that David and Goliath, David on another level was defeating that giant within him that would have kept him from becoming the great king of Israel that he was destined and prophesied to be. And it was removing a huge obstacle whereby when he, quote unquote, killed the giant, he became a giant. And so he became the same, but he married his strength and weakness together. Because come on, let's face it, somebody taking out a giant with a slingshot and a pebble. Okay. And so I looked at that as alchemy, as transmutation. And when I talk about transmutation, I'm talking about you taking something lower and elevating it to something higher. And whether you know it or not, everybody is an alchemist. If you take what you do and then you turn it into something that helps a lot of people, that's a transmutation. And most people, when they think of alchemy, they think of lead to gold. That's an example of alchemy that every person should understand. That lead, being one of the lowest level metals, could become this highly prized thing. Alchemy is when you go in the kitchen and you take disparate items, vegetables and sauces and all this kind of stuff, and you put them together and you elevate the experience of ingesting them. That's alchemy. And so with this whole thing about weaknesses and strengths, I see them as our way to move towards alchemy to make ourselves better. In that book that I just talked about, the laws of human nature, and yes, I'm going to drop the link in the description, he spends a lot of time talking about how to be better. He spends a lot of time dealing with our shadow parts. And when I talk about a shadow part, that's that part of us that a lot of people can see that we can't see or we try to ignore. If you tend to be jealous, if you tend to be gossipy, and you're sure as sugar know if you tend to be envious. And so those are some of the things that he spends time dealing with. in the different laws. Now, I'm gonna tell you, out of all of them, some of my favorite ones are at the end, where he talks about grandiosity and aggression and all of these different things. And I am like, this is so profound, because how he does it is he takes the history of a person to make it as an example. So, like in the grandiosity one, he talks about Michael Eisner from Disney, and I'm pretty sure everybody knows Disney because it's very contemporary. And with that whole contemporariness of dealing with, someone that we all know, what he's talking about is like, oh yeah, I remember that, or yeah, okay, so that's what was going on, and and that kind of thing. And so it makes it really real. He then does some other things that I really like, and that is for this whole thing about, this thing keeps popping in and out and taking my attention, y'all. So I apologize. And y'all say something. Let me know. Give me some hearts. Give me some love. Something like that. We having a talk. I want to make sure I know we're all here together. Okay, but anyway, so he does do something that I really like. And though with all of that being said, it's not a summation, but I think it's really good. And he talks about like Anton Chekhov, and he talks about his history. I knew of Anton Chekhov's work, but I didn't know of his history. And the way he presented it was beautiful. And it came down to, no matter how hard you have it, no matter what happens to you, the difference between you becoming a product of your environment and you becoming the best part of you comes down to two major things. And that is rationality and empathy. And he has a way of talking about rationality that I thoroughly enjoyed. And that was this. Let me see if I can find it for you guys. Y'all, I'm tempted. Fate opening stuff while I'm trying to do this live, just so you know. Okay, you know what? I'm not gonna tempt fate. I'm just gonna say it like this because it's pretty easy. What he says is that rationality is our ability to think instead of react emotionally. And I like it. I also wanted to addend it because being a person who has had the opportunity and the pleasure to be useful to a lot of folks, whether it be in business, in writing, or even in therapeutic ventures, I have always talked about the power of emotions and why we get them. And one of the things is emotions are there to give us insight and wisdom into ourselves. And so if you have a bad emotion, say greed or lust or envy or whatever the negative emotions are, they still are just as useful to us as the good emotions of joy, peace, love, happiness, and sharing, caring, those kinds of things. And what I would say, and what I've continued to say, and until I'm proven wrong, I'm still going to go this route, is that with emotions, when you get the lesson, they make you better. And I feel like emotions are road signs and traffic signals along our life's journey. That if you pay attention to them, if they tell you rough road ahead, if they tell you deer crossing, if they tell you slow down because a stoplight is coming, if you pay attention, your journey seems to go a little bit better. But if you don't, oh my gosh, there you have it. And I think that's probably a lot of reasons why we let our negative parts of ourselves, our quote unquote weaknesses, get so big and out of control and unruly. I think it's because we spend so much time trying to pretend they're not there, trying to ignore them. And the empathy part, that is something that it's hard to have empathy in a society where people are willing to shame, willing to quote unquote cancel people and all this kind of stuff. And this is not to pile on any kind of criticism. I'm just saying for me personally, um trying to get my arms and my mind around how to still have the proper amount of empathy for a person, especially if I don't agree with what they do, or what they say they believe, and based on what they say they believe, I'm seeing them do it. It's really hard. But yet and still doing that, I find that I get a little more grace for myself when I mess up. I get a little more patience with the things that I miss the mark on. There is a saying that I love, and it's a cautionary saying, and it is this: seen much, experienced little. And I like it because you can look at it different ways. When I first heard it, I was like, seen much, experienced little. They don't, have a good or a deep experience. But then I was like, let me take my own advice and look at this in as many different ways as I could. And when I flipped it and I was like, seen much, experienced little, to me, that could also be a person who has empathy, who is able to learn from other people's experiences so that they don't have to have those kinds of experiences. I hope I'm making sense. What in the comments for you out there that's going to be watching this? Can you let me know if I'm making sense? Okay. I think I am. I hope I am. But yeah. And so I was like, And just like learning to turn things around, learning how to not take things only at first face value, learning that there are many layers to our life. There are many things that lurk in the dark that could actually be giants. That was where I was like, oh my goodness, oh my gosh, I have to start working on this. And so that's why I wanted to come and just kind of talk with you, and let you know that it does not matter uh, how big your giant is. You can knock it down with just a little pebble. It does not matter how scared you might be of the boogie people living in that dark closet in the recesses of your mind. You know that thought when you're not paying attention and your mind wanders and you end up in that dark area of your mind and memories of stuff come up and you be like, no, oh, okay. you know that that's the land of your inner giants. And that's where you need to take the time to start getting in there, cleaning it out, and dealing with them, and incorporating what you can learn about that giant back into yourself, because you're the same. And when you start doing that, that strength that you have starts to turn that weakness into something that's elevated. Remember, you become an alchemist where you elevate yourself. And then no longer do you have this gang of villains. That's another podcast I did, and I'm going to add, go check that one out. But no longer do you have this gang of villains working inside you to like trip you up or cause you to miss the mark. And so those are just some of the things that I want us to quit ignoring and to actually embrace. Be okay with it. Be okay with the fact that, I got some things I'm going through, but I'm going to go through them. I came to pass, not to stay. Yeah. And in this part, I did talk about this in the podcast, but I do want to mention it here. And that is this. There are things that people don't want to be. They just don't. They don't want to be accused of it. They don't want to be it. Like I think one of the worst indictments you can give people is to call them a narcissist. Oh, you hurt somebody's feelings if you call them a narcissist. And they could be the poster child holding the cake and the pom-poms for being a narcissist, but they don't want to be one. And so, what I have actually been continuing to learn, because this is an ongoing thing, and if you ever feel like you've settled on something and you know everything there is to know about something, I can guarantee you're wrong. But there was a new book that came out, Rediscovering Narcissism, I believe it's called. I wish I could remember the guy's name off the top of my mind. I'll probably look it up. But in this book, he talked about the story of Narcissus and Echo, the Greek myth. And it's really powerful. And it's powerful because it talks about the extremes. Because Echo was in love with Narcissus. And Echo was cursed by Queen Hera for talking too much. And Queen Hera was like, okay, from here on out, you want to tell my business? Because that's basically what it came down to. She's like, you talk too much, you never shut up. And so I think the way the story goes is Echo was so chatty, and actually Hera liked her, but Hera let her in on some stuff and she talked too much, and it got back to Hera, and Hera was like, okay, guess what? You will never be able to have enough. You want to tell other people's business? You can do that. And so she made her Echo, meaning that she could only repeat the last thing someone said. And that's how it became. But she had this great love. She was a wood nymph. She had this great love for this young man named Narcissus. Narcissus. Yeah, Narcissus. And he had a tragic tale as well. And because he spurned the affections of another god, he got cursed. And so you have these two people that are quote unquote cursed, or beings that are cursed. And because he was so self-absorbed, and I think he had like taken this vow that he was not going to uh accept the affections of anybody else. The curse was that he would fall in love with himself. But yet and still he got Echo over here who's in love with him, but she can't tell him. All she can do is repeat back to him what he said. And so in the book, and before the book, but in the book, the author does a really good job of talking about echoist and narcissist. And what he says is they are on the opposite extremes of the same spectrum. And he posits that most people fall somewhere on this spectrum, and that there is a bell curve happy medium of folks who are, for the most part, they're fine. But when you have an extreme egoist or an extreme narcissist, that's where you have the problems. And I enjoyed that approach. And the reason why I enjoyed that approach is because it helps us to embrace an understanding of our strengths and our weaknesses. And what I found in starting to put this into practice, because yes, I know where I am on that scale. What I learned is that going back to strengths and weaknesses are the same. Your strength, when you start dealing with your weakness, will start to pull both of you to a healthy, happy middle. And a lot of times you can tell when somebody is off. And when I say off, I'm talking about their balance between the two, because they'll overcompensate. Think about the super macho guy, only to realize that he has a repressed need to cross dress, or the highly important official who has all of this power, and a lot of people, whatever he or she says or decrees affects a lot of people, only to realize on their opposite side that they like to have a collar put on them and led around like a little pony or a little horse or a little dog. And so there's always this fight between the strength and the weakness, but they're the same. And so, like I said before, dealing with your Goliath does not mean that you have to uh, embrace the extreme opposite of yourself. It means that once you start just, even facing it, when you sling that slingshot and that giant goes down, you become the best parts of the aspects of that giant, aka that weakness. And I'm going to tell you, it's real scary to do it. It's scary. Like, if you know that you tend in your dark side to covet, meaning that you see something somebody else has, and either you want it or you get into the dangerous side of covetousness where you start to envy them and be jealous and say, well, why did they get that? I'm better than them. Or, you need to deal with that, because if you deal with it, then you're going to find that in that, it's probably a road sign telling you, beware, falling rocks, ahead, meaning treachery. You about to wreck yourself. And by taking the time to do that, instead of acting irrationally, you start to act rational by, like I was saying earlier, instead of reacting, excuse me, instead of thinking, just like, okay, we're going to think instead of react. Integrate what the emotion is teaching you. Integrate the wisdom that you got from it, so that you make an informed thought, decision, behavior. Because irrationality and rationality, no matter how much we want to say it's a thinking game, it's a behavioral game. And behavior comes out of emotion. And so when you get an emotion, it has a message for you. What is it about this person, this thing, that causes me to behave this way? What is it that I need to know and grow and become so that I can get better from this? And I'm going to be closing this down real soon. But the other thing I want to say is this part. I did talk about this in the podcast, but there is this term, these two terms. They're German in origin, and one is called Schadenfreude, and the other one is called Mitfreude. Now, Schadenfreude is when you take a pleasure in other people's pain, but Mitfreude is when you take a pleasure in other people's happiness. And so they're the same. They are based on pleasure derived from observing other people. One is pain, the other is pleasure. And when you bring them together and practice the Mitfreud and actually be happy when other people get stuff and other things and things happen for that other person, what you're going to find is the Schadenfreude that you have is only there to make you aware of the fact that you have the potential to have what that other person has. And that's why you had that feeling in the first place, just to wake you up to be like, if they can have it, I can do that too. Thank you. And not be upset with that person. Just understanding what that negative feeling was for that split moment. And that's how you move out of irrational behavior to rational behavior. Because don't fool yourself. It's not all about thinking. Because if that was the case, all of us would be rational and we would never buy stuff that we think about. Why did I buy that? Okay. So guess what? This has been great, you guys. Thank you so much. I'm going to drop the podcast link in the show notes. I'm going to drop the book for the laws of human nature, and I'll also drop the book for the narcissist. It's a great read. He does a wonderful job on that. And thank you guys for watching. Thank you for sharing. Please like this video. I am actually kind of like starting out, and I'm learning as I go, and I want this to be with us. So please don't forget to like it, because I'm told that helps me. When you like it, it tells YouTube that I'm doing something okay or all right. So like the video, comment, and share it, and then hop on over to the podcast. You can listen to the podcast on most major platforms, including your Alexa. All you have to do is ask Alexa to play MichelleSpiva Wisdom Smack. And it'll play my latest one. And I do these daily, the podcast. I'm trying to see if I can do the videos daily too. I don't know, but we'll see. But anyway, thank you so much. Thank you for those who have recently subscribed, who have commented on my other videos. And I love you. Mwah! Thank you so much. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. So this is MichelleSpiva, your practical priestess of wisdom, with another Wisdom Smack chat. All right. Bye. Now we'll see if I can close this. Bye, y'all.